So a few polls came out yesterday, if you looked at 538's website, from a firm called Redfield and Wilton. And you might be like, who are these people? And I kind of had the same question. And then you saw that they were sponsored by The Telegraph, which is either a conservative or many people might consider them a right-wing newspaper in the UK. And this polling firm that we're talking about is also based in the UK. And I'm like, well, why is a conservative UK newspaper and a polling firm from the UK polling the US elections? And we have been seeing a few polling firms from outside the United States polling in the United States, and it's really funny because you usually see some discrepancies. But we're going to go over the polls that they have done in the so-called swing states. And we're not going to look at all their polls, because in their swing state poll they had like New Mexico as a swing state, which shows right there that they really don't understand the concept or really understand what the swing states are. But we're going to go ahead and delve into their polls, because there are problems with these polls. And then I want to talk about how that might be impacting everything overall, talking about people like Nate Silver, stuff like that, because it is an issue that is coming up now, as far as maybe manipulating polls or including certain polls or maybe over polling for the sake of betting. Okay. And this might become a real big issue, but let's go ahead and delve into the crosstabs for this Redfield and Wilton poll. All right, so let's go ahead and go into the crosstabs of this. And we'll start off with Arizona. And as we can see, Donald Trump is up by 1 according to this poll, definitely within the margin of error. The gender gap looks about as it should, but then as soon as we get into the age breakdown, it gets really weird, because you have Donald Trump, 18 and 24, that doesn't surprise me. And then Donald Trump winning a lot, 35 to 44, even though we've seen in many polls that number be quite closer. And then Donald Trump winning by less with 45 to 54, which is usually the group that he does the best with, along with 55 to 64. And then all of a sudden, Kamala Harris winning with 65 and older. Now, this is a problem that we have seen in a number of polls, or I don't even want to say it's a problem, but it seems to be some sort of fluid aspect of it, which is these 65 and older voters are not necessarily always fitting into a nice, clean category. So that is a group that a lot of people say, as you get older, you get more conservative. That trend might not be the case. Now, the one thing that I found was a red flag in this poll, and it will be an issue with a number of polls we see by this polling firm, is it's saying that 13% of people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 are now going to vote for Donald Trump. No. But yet, on the other hand, only 5% of those who voted for Donald Trump are voting for Kamala Harris. So 13% of Biden voters all of a sudden going to Trump does not make sense. Okay, let's go ahead and go over to Georgia, and I'm already at that part, but let's go ahead and look at the numbers. So Donald Trump 49, Kamala Harris 47. That's within the margin of error. In both of these states, we see a much closer gender gap, which in most southern states we do. That's not big. Kamala Harris. And then again, we're seeing kind of weird age distributions. So here, Kamala Harris, that makes sense. This number should be more for Kamala Harris, I think. But then all of a sudden, this number, 35 to 44-year-olds, of 35 to 44-year-olds, Kamala Harris is winning 54 to 44. That seems skewed in her favor. And then 45 to 54-year-olds, again, we see it for Donald Trump, which makes sense, along with the 55 to 64. But then now all of a sudden we see 65 and older flipped, which is par for the course in Georgia. So that isn't a big deal. But then again, you see this one issue. You see 9% of Trump voters voting for Harris, but then 11% of Biden supporters going for Trump. Again, we're not seeing these types of numbers really anywhere. We're not seeing them anywhere. So I don't know where these are coming from, how they're getting these numbers, but this would mean a pretty big deviation. Unfortunately, we don't have any race crosstabs or other crosstabs that we're used to. This shows how kind of, I guess, elementary this poll is for this UK polling firm. They're not polling the demographics that, or polling the crosstabs that we're used to seeing in like the New York Times poll or really any other polls that we have. Now when we get to the Michigan poll, we're starting to see it look a little bit better. Kamala Harris up 48 to 45. The gender distribution looks good. And in this one, the age distribution actually looks a little better. So we have 60% of 18 to 24-year-olds going for Harris and 55% of 25 to 34-year-olds going for Harris. That seems right. And then you start seeing the flip, 35 to 44. And then you start seeing it go more towards the Republicans. And then again, 65 and older, you have Kamala Harris win that group. This, I'm starting to think that the 65 and older group is going to be the key to this election because they are just so fluid as far as how they vote. Now again, this number that they have relies on 12% of Biden voters all of a sudden going to Donald Trump. Now they have 9%, but 12 is bigger than 9, right? So you're seeing a lot of these, and they just really don't make sense, having these huge chunks of Biden voters going over to Donald Trump's side. Again, we haven't seen this in a lot of the polling in the past. All right, so we got the Nevada poll here, and we see overall Donald Trump winning 46 to 45. If we look at the gender distribution, it looks okay. Donald Trump winning males by 11%, and Kamala Harris winning females by 8%. But it's all of a sudden when you get into the age distribution, all of a sudden if we look at age, Donald Trump is winning 18 to 24-year-olds 45 to 39, which seems very unlikely. And then the same thing, 25 to 34, 40, he's winning on 46 to 44. These are demographics that have traditionally been going for Kamala Harris. So this goes against the trend. And then Kamala Harris, 35 to 44, okay, I could see that. And then all of a sudden, this one is just really, really, really odd. Of those 55 to 64, Kamala Harris is winning 60% of 55 to 64. That seems off. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump's winning seniors. It's like this Nevada poll is just going all over the place. And then here we go again. That Joe Biden discrepancy. We have 12% of people who said they voted for Joe Biden in 2020. All of a sudden are voting for Donald Trump this election compared to 6% of Trump supporters going to Kamala Harris. Again, these would be big anomalies, and these would be poll shifters, to be quite honest. And looking at the age distribution and all of these, they just don't make sense. They don't make sense whatsoever. Now, we have the North Carolina poll done by this organization, and we can see that Kamala Harris is up by 1, which I would love to think that's true, but as we've seen, we've been poking a lot of holes in these polls. The first one is the female number, because even though Donald Trump is winning the male vote here, and Kamala Harris is winning the female votes, we only have 38 to 46, so there's a lot of female voters who are undecided in this poll. Now, let's get back to the issue. I didn't put it in red, but let's get back to this issue about the age distribution. All of a sudden in North Carolina, according to this poll, Donald Trump is winning 62% of 18 to 24-year-olds. No, he's not. And then all of a sudden Kamala Harris is winning 52 to 35 at 25 to 34. No, that should be much, much closer. Kamala Harris is definitely not winning 63% of 35 to 44-year-olds. And then it evens out here, and then the 65 and older seem like that. Now, in this one, it's very interesting because only 9% of Biden voters from 2020 are going for Donald Trump, whereas 8% are going there. So it's kind of more of a balancing effect. But even though these numbers for Biden and Donald Trump for the respective candidates look good, these age numbers are just all over the place. They make no sense whatsoever. As we get to Pennsylvania, we have a 45 to 45 race. The gender distribution seems fine. 50 to 41 for males for Donald Trump, 49 to 40 for females for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris winning 54% of 18 to 24-year-olds. But then again, 25 to 34-year-olds, she's winning 62%. That seems a little bit high. 35 to 44, Kamala Harris up by 4, I can see that. Then it shifts over to Donald Trump from 45 and older. That seems right. But then again, we have this discrepancy. So we have 9% of Joe Biden supporters or voters in 2020 now going for Donald Trump, but only 4% of Trump people going to Kamala Harris. Again, you're talking about a doubling up of this number. This is just a weird anomaly in this poll. And then finally, let's get into our last poll, which is Wisconsin, where we have 49% going for Kamala Harris compared to 46%. Now, the male distribution seems a little bit close here, 48 to 48, but in Wisconsin, we do see the male voters being much, much tighter, as well as the female voters. So in Wisconsin, you do see a lot less of this big gender gap. So that in and of itself is not something that's off. Age distribution, again, the 18 to 24, Kamala Harris winning 56 to 40, that makes sense. But then all of a sudden, 25 to 34, Donald Trump's winning 57 to 38. That goes against the trends that we've been seeing. Tie, 35 to 44, that seems good. Kamala Harris winning 45 to 54 by 2%, that seems off. And then Kamala Harris winning 65 and older voters, 57% to 40% in Wisconsin. Nothing's showing this in any other polls. And then when it comes to those who voted for Joe Biden, this one can maybe balance itself out. 7% who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 now are voting for Donald Trump, with 6% for Kamala Harris, who voted for Donald Trump in 2020. So you do see a little bit of a balance there. But again, these age distributions are all over. So this is the thing about this poll is top line number, the horse race number looks okay, but once you delve into some of these crosstabs, like those who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, all of a sudden going 11 or 12% for Donald Trump, that is unheard of. And on top of it, these age distributions are really all over the place. Now, we do see inconsistencies in a lot of the age distribution in other polls that we have seen, like the New York Times, Emerson, Quinnipiac, and all that. We do see those. However, these are to an extreme where all of a sudden Kamala Harris is winning 65 and older by 17%. Donald Trump's winning 62% of 18 to 24-year-olds. The numbers are all over the place. And again, why is a conservative newspaper paying for a British polling firm, a conservative newspaper in Britain, paying for a British polling firm to poll the U.S. elections? And this comes to, I think, a bigger issue that's happening. So as many of you know, Nate Silver has now gone and worked for, I guess, some sort of betting site regarding elections and other things like that. And it's really come to the point that these people who have this authority, these people who have this, I think, notoriety, okay, as far as polling, they are now starting to sway opinions and made people bet based on those opinions. Now, a lot of the stuff that Nate Silver has come out with the last few weeks has been absolute garbage, where he says, oh yeah, Donald Trump's going to win, even though like all of the state polls are giving more of a nod to Kamala Harris. Like his numbers just do not make sense. And the question we have to ask ourselves is there an ulterior motive in those numbers? Is he trying to skew the numbers in a way that can skew the betting odds on the website he all of a sudden is now working for? Because remember, if he skews numbers to Trump's way and then all of a sudden Kamala Harris wins, guess what? The House wins in that case and they get a lot of money. Now, I don't want to jump way off that, off that bridge, that conspiracy theory bridge, but, there is some discussion now. And a lot of people, even in the comments here, have talked about this issue with Nate Silver now all of a sudden being more of a tool of the betting world than he necessarily is of this and of the real political world. And I haven't been a big fan of his models, but at least they were based in some sort of statistical methodology. So, and again, all of a sudden he is diverging from what 538 has done. And it's a little bit fishy. And the reason I mention this because it's like these types of polls that once you dig into the crosstabs and you look at them, you're like, okay, yeah, the horse race seems okay, but the rest of the underlying data in here just makes no sense at all. It's polls like this that you got to wonder what the motives are for these polls, especially since every Tom, Dick, and Harry has now a polling firm. It becomes quite skeptical as far as why we have these. All right, well, I just wanted to go over these polls because I know a lot of you might have seen those polls and thought, oh, but is this looking bad for Kamala Harris? I can't glean from this if it helps Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. To me, with the age distributions being just totally off the wall, I say all of these are garbage polls, the ones that support Harris and the ones that support Trump, because just there's no consistency to previous polls that we've seen. All right, well, I just wanted to talk about these. Thank you all very much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.